It's going to be somewhere, I said, plus or minus 5. So it was on a little bit of the minus 5. 4 years, 2 months. As I said, I think this judge, he said almost exactly what we predicted him to say. I know you've done a lot of good things, but I also need to take the bad things you've done into consideration, and therefore, here's my sentence. The prosecutor asking for 11 years was way beyond the pale. Department of Probation said 7 years, and he undercut them. I will tell you, no matter what they say when they come out here, the defense attorneys, I hope they're not going to get mad at me for saying this, they're going to go and have a great meal tonight. They signed up for a case where a guy was facing life in prison, and now a 50-year-old man will probably get out at 52 to 53 years old, which is 4 years younger than I am. He'll have his whole life ahead of him. He's got tens of millions of dollars in the bank, and hopefully he'll make this horrible situation as productive as possible. He's already started teaching classes in college, in law, in prison, and he'll make a positive impact on the young men, especially the men of our society, about what not to do when you achieve the level of success and fame and fortune that Sean Combs had achieved. And that obviously played a role in the judge's decision making.
So for perspective here, he's gotten more than 4 years, and we understand he was only convicted of 2 of the charges, but the evidence from the other charges that were thrown out is actually considered.
Is allowed, yeah. In federal court, that's allowed to come in. If you're over there in the state court, a lot less so. But here, the judge is allowed to take that into consideration. He's also the judge must take into consideration the deterrent effect that it will have on the general public, not just on Sean Combs, but on sending a message to society that you can't do this, and if you do this, you're going to get severely punished.
So if you are a part of the prosecution team, how do you view this? What's your response there?
Well, you're already devastated from the acquittals from a couple of months ago, right? Because they were shooting for the moon, and they got nowhere close to the moon. Look, they took down an international icon. They took down an international celebrity. So that's a notch in their belt, if you want to look at it that way. I don't think that's the appropriate way to look at it, but I know that's how they look at it. But they were looking to put this guy in jail for life, and that didn't happen. They were looking to put Eric Adams, the mayor, in jail for life. That case got dismissed. So they've taken it on the chin a little bit, and this is all from the prior U.S. attorney. This is not the current U.S. attorney who's here now.
So what are we to make of this 4 years? Is there any possibility he could have that reduced? Anything that he could do in prison?
So it's interesting. Had the judge sentenced him much more severely to what the prosecutor wanted, like 11
years, 3 months,
I could see President Trump considering that's just too much. But now, it's like the judge didn't really crush him. Those of us who practice in this courthouse, it's a tough place to be, man. This is a tough place to be. It's a tough place for a criminal defendant to get sentenced. And this cannot be, objectively speaking, this is not a harsh sentence from where it began. Again, the Department of Probation is supposed to be the objective arm of this, and they recommended 7 years. And the judge almost cut that in half. He cut it by a third. The defense has to be very proud of themselves and the job that they did securing this type of sentence. Of course, Sean Combs isn't happy. He wants to come on. He wants to be here right now being on Fox 5.
He had speaking engagements lined up, as soon as next week, even if they were community-centered or so. But we were hearing that, which some interpreted as a bit of arrogance, on his part.
Yeah, I don't know. I doubt that had an influence on the judge, but apparently he was picked up on voice calls, because all your calls, unless it's to your lawyer, are recorded. And so they told the judge, we heard a call, and he thinks he's going to be out next week. Yeah, that's not the way to go. I wouldn't be too happy. My client, I would be out. Do you have mind?
But do you think that influenced things last moment, or was this already set in his mind?
I doubt it. I think this judge, he's a young judge. He's a new judge. He's also a judge who clerked on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. He has an excellent reputation, not just for his intellect, but his judicial temperament by both sides, which is really, as a judge, where you want to be. I think he's probably was prepared 10 times over, and I'm pretty sure that this is what he was thinking before he walked into the room.
So at this point, where do we go from here? I mean, we're talking about the message that this sends to people.
Let me tell you where P. Diddy goes, which is good news for him. anywhere is better than where he is. Anywhere is better. So he'll have some options as to which different, when I say options, he won't have the options, but the Department of the Bureau of Prisons will, right? And now I'm sure if you really look, it's still going on in there, but you request the judge, Your Honor, he'd like to be close to his children, so could he be in Florida? Or he wants to be close to his mother, I'm making this up a little bit, in California. The judge doesn't actually have the power to designate where he goes. The judge just makes a suggestion. The Bureau of Prison makes the ultimate call, but the lawyers can request and then tell you why he wants to be in one location or the other. But it will be, every part of his life will be enhanced. There is no worse place for him to be than the MDC, except maybe if it was a state case in Rikers Island. But and he'll probably be moved in a week. I mean, they'll move him relatively quickly because he's now a sentenced inmate, right. And MDC is typically for people waiting trial or waiting to be sentenced.
So in terms of the facility where he'll be, are we talking about maximum security? You think it'll be minimum security? Where does he fall on this spectrum?
If they put him in any kind of maximum security, it's not for him harming others. It's for others harming him. Right. So he won't be. But he'll probably fight. Isolated. He'll probably fight hard against that because that's not a pleasant place to be. He'll probably wind up in a medium security environment where he'll be in a cell, but he'll probably have a lot of freedom of movement as opposed to in a minimum security where you're like in a huge dorm room, almost like an army barracks.
Well, look, let's ask you this. How did you think this was going to go? Because you've been commenting on all our shows. Yeah. You've been watching this one. You certainly are in this field, in this profession. What were you thinking about this?
As I said this morning on Good Day, I was thinking it was a ±5. But then when I heard the judge's comments, as I was walking here reading the live feed, I was a little nervous for Sean. Look, I know his defense team, so I'm rooting for them. Let me be honest. I was texting with Mark Ignifilo this morning. Xavier, who spoke today, was in my office earlier in the week. And obviously, it's my field, so I'm rooting for them. But when the judge was saying, I've taken all your good deeds in, but there needs to be I think he used the word severe punishment. I'm like, oh, boy. Then I'm thinking maybe he is going to go 7, 8, 9, but he didn't. So as I said, I know Sean wanted to come home today. I get it. I know his kids wanted to come home today. I'm a little bit more trenched in the realities of what it's like when the Southern District of New York charges you with such a serious crime. You're in front of such a serious judge. You're in front of what's known as the best U.S. Attorney's Office in the nation, and to walk away after all of this publicity, an 8-week trial, all of the testimony, with basically he's going to wind up serving 3 years ultimately.
We also understand that he was fined. There's a $500,000 fine.
That's probably like me asking you for $5. I mean, I'm not being a wise guy, but I mean, it's probably literally, I don't know how much you got in your pocket, but you know what I'm saying.
So what does that mean, though? I mean, if the judge knew that this is like asking the average person for $5, why even do it?
I think that's the maximum. I think he can get $250 on each count. I think is the maximum fine.
Because that's the man's charge.
I think he gave him the maximum on each count. Right. So look, again, he didn't get convicted of such a serious crime, but as you said earlier, it was all the evidence beforehand. That video, you can't escape that video of him beating up that young lady, her testimony, the letter that she wrote. He wrote a letter to the judge that submitted last night. Sean Combs did. I'm a changed man. I found God. I'm sorry. Of course, that had some impact. But the letter from Cassie Ventura saying, he did all this to me. I contemplated suicide. I'm still afraid of him to this day. Those are the kinds of things that move judges. And I'm speaking from experience, and where judges have put that on the record, that, you still have people out there. And he said it. The judge said it. You caused both of these women to consider taking their own lives. The judge said he considered that.
The judge also referred to the fact in addressing the remorse, if you will, that Combs supposedly had when making his statements. The judge told him that even after the Cassie video, you still attacked Jane, punched her in the head. That was also part of the comments in today's sentencing.
I will tell you, having done this for quite some time myself, the way the judge set it up, I did not think 50 months was coming out of his mouth. I thought you were going to hear 72, 86, something a little more severe.
So the judge, we understand, we're getting a quote from him that Combs is immense, this is a direct quote, financial resources essentially enabled these crimes. If that is the case, what do we do with that? He still has his immense financial resources.
Listen, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Sean Combs has learned his lesson. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he never wants to see the inside of a jail cell again. Now, to contradict myself, my father represented Jennifer Lopez at that courthouse across the street when he was on trial for his life again for the shooting, the attempted murder 20 some odd years ago, and with Johnny Cochran and Ben Brofman, and he was found not guilty. You would think after coming that close to spending life in prison, you would live life a little differently, and he didn't. Now he was a much younger person. He's a much older person now. So hopefully he's learned his lesson, and he'll use that money and that power and that prestige and his brilliance, because you got to give the guy credit for what he's achieved, for good, to go in and you know, Fox 5, Lisa Evers, Street Soldiers, to go in and talk to these young guys who think going into a gang is the way to go. Sean Combs will be in a position to be like, look, I've been in prison. It's not where you guys want to be. It's not what you want to do, and use this negative for a positive.
The court of public opinion is certainly going to weigh heavy, because that Cassie video from 2016 is very hard to shake. It's notorious. It's infamous. You know, so if the things that you are suggesting you would advise a client to do, he in fact does, then maybe there is a path, you know, to doing
back into society. Listen, he's got a lot to make up for, and I don't think he's going to be walking down the red carpet at the Grammys anytime soon. I don't think he's going to be at the Oscars anytime soon. But I think if he went to the Police Athletic League in the Bronx, he'd be welcomed with open arms, or in Chicago, or in LA, or in Miami, and say, look, let me go in and talk to these kids. Look, he's already doing it, right? He's already doing it in prison. So you got to try, when life gives you lemons, you got to figure out a way to make lemonade, and that will help him, because don't forget, he's going to be on post-release supervision.
Right.
Yes.
So it's not, when he gets released, they're going to look at what he does. He can't jaywalk. I mean, he can't spit on the street.
No, he has to walk
He can't play his radio too loud. I mean, he's literally got to be, because the judge could put you back in for the period of time of the post-release supervision. So I anticipate and his lawyers vouched for him. His lawyers said, look, you let him out, we'll watch him. We'll keep our eye on him. And I imagine that they will. They're all very, very close now. When you live through a trial like this, you become family.
I'm just keeping my eye on the podium, because we know at some point that someone will be coming to talk, to make a statement, whether it's the defense, whether it's the prosecution.
Well, probably what happens now, just so you know, is Sean will go back into a holding cell in here, and then his team will go and see him. And it's a balancing test, because I'm telling you from personal experience, they are, if not happy, the defense team, they are relieved that was 50 months and
as
not
opposed to 20 years.
Exactly. So they are relieved, even though speaking to them, I think we're going to get probation. They weren't going to get probation.
So just to clarify for anyone who may be joining us, Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced to 50 months in prison for the crimes for which he was convicted. Now, there was a moment where the judge spoke directly to Sean, and he says, Mr. Combs, you and your family, you're going to get through it, that there is a light at the end of this tunnel. That's a direct quote. What does that say about the judge in this particular case?
Well, as I said, he's a brand new judge, brand new, but he's already enjoying an excellent reputation for his intelligence, his knowledge of the law, and his judicial temperament. And that's judicial temperament. That's and compassion and empathy. So right now, literally in these minutes, you have defense attorneys, 8 and 9 of them, sitting there talking to him,
right,
and saying, Sean, we know you're disappointed and but we're going to get you in a good facility. You're going to do some programming, and in 24 to 30, they'll have all the math. 32 months, you'll be in a halfway house and you'll be back on track. And you got to just keep that in perspective. Lisa Evers just covered a case across the
side, and at that point, she's trying to get out and get out. And,
yeah, I mean, where a guy was facing 20 years and he went in 2 days ago for 5 years. Of course, he was disappointed going in for 5 years where he's going to have to do 4, but it's a heck of a lot better than 20.
And again, as you pointed out, time served will be factored into that.
100%.
So, what is it, 85% of the time that you have to do?
Right. So he's already been in 13 or 14 months, and then you add a little bit onto that, and then the carrot they hold over you when you're incarcerated is, if you're good, you get that 85%. If you pay attention, you abide by all the rules and all the laws inside the prison. So that's why you abide. So you get that 85%. But they also release you on a halfway house also, even before the 85%, where you go in a facility and you're allowed to leave at 8 o'clock in the morning and come back at 8 o'clock at night. You got to look for a job. You have to be productive, looking for a job, doing volunteer work, something like that.
something that they're going to do for him? Allow him to leave? I mean, this is one of the wealthiest, most famous men in the world.
In 2.5 years, it's definitely in the realm. Look, he's going to be a model prisoner. He has been already. He will be. So I could definitely see that happen.
We're going to have to leave it right there because we know we're about to toss back to the studio so that Linda can set up for our 5 o'clock news. But Linda, as we say goodbye to you, we will be in this place and at some point joined by Lisa Evers, who's been in the courtroom all day. So for Arthur Aidala, for Duarte Geraldine, we're going to now send things back inside to you from Lower Manhattan.
All right, Antoine Duarte, Arthur Aidala, thanks very much. One last thing here. The judge in court saying to Ms. Ventura and the other brave survivors that came forward, I want to first say, we heard you. All right, continuing coverage now on the 5 o'clock news.
Right now on the 5 o'clock news.
All right, we are following breaking news as we come on air at 5 o'clock tonight. Sean Diddy Combs sentenced to 4 years, 2 months behind bars. We are live outside the courthouse with reaction pouring in as we speak. Good evening. Thanks for being with us. I'm Steve Lacey.
And I'm Natasha Verma. The news coming in within the last 15 minutes.
All right, we have extensive Fox 5 team coverage.
And we kick things off with our team, Antoine Lewis and Duarte Geraldino, live with the big story at 5.
The big headline that is undeniable after all these months, this trial, that we have a verdict, 50 months in prison for Sean Diddy Combs. Antoine, you've been covering this all day. The tension was so high.
It was.
What do you think about this?
Well, absolutely. We were shocked and, if you will, surprised because the recommendation, Combs was convicted in July, found guilty of the lesser of the 2 of the 4 charges. So we're talking about the Mann Act, transportation to engage in prostitution. And that carried a maximum of 10. So he was looking potentially at 20 years. But the fact that 50 months came in and he's already got time served is figuring in. So we're now talking somewhere less than 4, and then that would then determine where he would go from there. But the fact of the matter is that the judge also this morning talked to Combs, feeling that Combs had not expressed any remorse, for his actions of the 2 charges that he was convicted of. So when Combs took the stand, what was it, around 4 o'clock or so this afternoon, among the first things he had to do was try to address that matter. And we know that when he was on the stand that he cried. He took it, what were the words that he used? He was disgusted, shameful, and sick by his actions, leading up to all of this. And of course, the Cassie video and all of that. So at some point, the judge who had the choice of either giving him the max of 20, or following the Department of Probation's recommendations of somewhere between 6 to maybe 7, just over 7 years, there. But the judge did admonish Combs, that he didn't feel that he brought in enough, to validate, like that. And he also had to take into consideration the impact to the public, when making this decision.
We also know that he was also fined $500,000, $250,000 for each of those counts for which he was convicted. But 4 years after all of this, it would seem like this is an extraordinary victory for his defense team, even though he is still going to be behind bars for several years to come.
Right. You were talking to Arthur earlier, Arthur Aidala, our coverage. We bring Arthur in now, Arthur, just to weigh in on the fact about the amount of time that was given and how that's interpreted from your perspective, being, a criminal defense attorney.
So as someone who practices in this courthouse, if I was one of Sean Combs' supporters out here, when I heard the number 50 months, I would have been yelling and screaming the way they were yelling and screaming at the verdict. And I'm being sincere, because in this courthouse, the judges typically are known as being of handing down pretty heavy sentences. And this is not a heavy sentence, all things considered. He's facing 20. They wanted 11. Probation has 7. And he goes and cuts probation by at least a third, pardon me for the math, and he's already got 14 months out of the 50 in, which probably counts as like 16, almost 17 months, and then 50 won't really be 50, it'll probably be like 43 or 44. Where he started the day he surrendered and where he is today, he's got to be breathing a sigh of relief, even though I'm sure he's very disappointed. I'm sure he really wanted to come out here and be interviewed by you guys today. But, I can tell you this, as someone who's been here a long time, there are other judges in this courthouse this would not have been the sentence. There's no way they would have gone below the probation recommendation of 7 years. So the defense team deserves an enormous amount of credit. Mr. Combs deserves a lot of credit for the letter he wrote last night and speaking to the judge today. And the judge, look, he's obviously took all of this into consideration. You're talking about a judge who's a rookie as a judge, but not a rookie as a lawyer. He clerked in the United States Supreme Court. He was a prosecutor. He was in private practice. He took a huge pay cut to come on the bench. His heart is in the right place. He's intelligent. He was empathetic to Sean Combs, saying, you and your family are going to get through this.
It sounds like you're saying he was fair.
He was fair. He was more than fair. I will tell you, he was fair, leaning towards lenient towards Sean Combs. One of the factors that any judge in federal court sentencing by law has to take into consideration is deterrence, general deterrence. Besides specific deterrence, saying, Mr. Combs, I need to punish you so that you don't do this again. I also need to punish you so that the whole world knows, because the whole world is watching, if you do these acts, there's going to be severe consequences. And that's where a judge can kind of lean into a heavier sentence. The judge didn't do this. He started off saying, I think there needs to be a significant sentence. And I was like, uh-oh, he's in trouble. 50 months here, of course. Anyone who goes to jail, you don't understand, 1 day in jail is horrible. 1 day in jail is horrible. People telling you when you can go to the bathroom, when you can eat, when you can sleep. The lights are on all the time. It's not a place that you want. I visit prison, and I can't wait to get out of there, knowing I'm going to leave. So Sean Combs and his defense team should be breathing a sigh of relief.
So he got 50 months, and in the same breath, the judge says to his victims, we hear you. Do you think he heard them? What do you think the reaction to the people who were victimized? That video is so difficult to get out of anyone's mind who has ever seen it. Did the judge hear them?
I think he did. I think if that video didn't exist, he may have gotten less. Look, the Mann Act is a crime that wasn't even prosecuted until lately.
Further perspective, the Mann Act basically involves going to like a brothel or where there's
over
some
state
sort of
line
commercial.
But it's got to be over state lines.
Over state lines,
right?
It usually involves some sort of commercial aspect, meaning like paying for a service or something like that. Correct?
Yeah, so they talked about doing it with our governor, Elliot Spitzer. Mm-hmm. They talked about doing it with my former client and now very good friend Lawrence Taylor, the New York Giant player. But when they called me about Lawrence Taylor, I said, you're going to bring a Mann Act charge because he went to New Jersey and got a prostitute? I go, you guys haven't done it in 100 years. But lately, that was 15 years ago, lately they have been looking at the Mann Act and bringing some case. And there was one case where someone did get significantly sentenced, and that's what the prosecutor leaned on today, that we do, Judge, we could show you there is a precedent to sending someone to jail for 20 years. But they were exigent circumstances here. The judge did not fall for that. If the video didn't exist, I don't even know, Sean may have even gotten a lighter sentence.
So speaking about that video and a lot of the evidence, we know that he was acquitted of some of these charges, and yet that evidence was still taken into consideration when the judge came up with his sentencing. Talk about that.
The judge didn't do anything wrong. That is the law. I don't agree with it. I was involved in a case where there was in this courthouse, and it was a homicide case, and he was found not guilty of the homicide, but guilty of some lesser drug charges. And the judge banged the heck out of him on the lesser drug charges because I heard the evidence about the homicide, and even though the jury didn't believe it, I'm taking it into consideration. To some degree, that's what happened here. To some degree, it's part of the rules we live by. The judge is allowed to take your whole life into consideration, everything about you. And look, the defense wanted them to, right? The defense said, look at all his good acts. Look at the charter school. Look at the donations. Look at his children. Look at his mother. So the judge said, I can't just look at all the good stuff and not look at all the bad stuff. And he said that. The judge said, I have to take both sides into consideration. Again, when he said a significant jail sentence is in order here, I said out loud, walking to you guys, I was like, uh-oh, like this is going to be rough. 50 months under these circumstances, As I said, if I'm Mark Agnifilo, the lead lawyer, who's a friend of mine, I'd be opening up a good bottle of red wine tonight and say, I kind of saved the guy's life.
And to understand where he's going next, are we thinking, and you mentioned this before, what type of prison might he be going to?
Well, I'm sure Lisa, whoever's coming out to help us out, will be able to talk about what his lawyers asked for. The lawyers can ask the judge to make a recommendation, and I'm sure they know where they want. There's different facilities. Sometimes you ask to be close to your children. Sometimes you ask for a facility to be close to your older mother. So they'll make that determination. They'll take his security risk to himself. He's a target. So where are they going to put him to protect Sean, not to protect the inmates from Sean? And then ultimately the Bureau of Prisons will make that decision, and he'll have a much better life than he's had the last year at the MDC.
Thank you so much. You want to toss it back to the studio for some more information?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, we just want to interject here because we've got Lisa Evers, who's on the phone right now. She spent the entire day inside the courtroom and can really paint a picture of what Diddy did the moment that he found out his fate.
Natasha, I'm just about at our camera over here. He was completely motionless when the judge read that sentence that it would be 50 months. That's 4 years and 2 months, and that also that 5 years supervised release after that. I just got over to the camera right here, so I'm going to walk over to where everybody is. But what an emotional day. Diddy breaking down, making a statement to the court, and then breaking down as he turned to his mother to apologize to his mother. And are we good here? I think I'm going to go on the. Do you guys hear me on the camera?
Yeah, we can hear you. And Lisa, we're seeing the images of him just with his hands in his face. Just what was that moment? Just kind of witnessing all of that.
It was so the whole day was so emotional. Let me switch over to the microphone here and get rid of my phone.
We see you on camera now.
So the whole day, Natasha, was really emotional because right before the lunch break early afternoon, we had we heard from the kids. Each one of his 6 children got up and spoke to the court, and Diddy got very emotional. The kids got very emotional, and then just a short time ago, within the last hour, as everything was wrapping up here, he was allowed at the very end of it all to address. Diddy was allowed to address the court. So he got up, he stood up, and he waited a couple of minutes before he gathered his thoughts and everything, and he started apologizing to everybody. He said, I apologize to the judge, I apologize to Miss Ventura, I apologize to Jane, I apologize. And he goes, I knew better, and he admitted that. He goes, I knew better. And then he turned around to his mother. His mother was like 2 or 3 rows back, and he goes, and my mother raised me better than that. And then he kind of broke down, and then he turned around, and the kids were just all, like they were just motionless at that point. They're back in the rows and sitting there. And then he was, he did these apologies. He said that I would like another chance. I want a chance to be a father. The kids, they're very, very powerful presence. I mean, to see these 6 beautiful young people, that are all there in support of him. His mother there being very strong. They showed a video right before the lunch break also that showed him when his mother had brain surgery. He was by her side, sleeping in the hospital by her bed, feeding his mother, and it was just that part was very, very moving. But the judge, and he gave an
How long did he speak for, the judge, before he actually said 50 months?
He spoke for quite a bit because the judge first, and also too, there were other people that were there at the sentencing this afternoon. They had, the defense team spoke, all of those lawyers. They also brought in a reverend community activist from Miami. I think they were really hoping he'd walk out of there today and get, be in Miami this weekend, and that could, at his mansion. His mother lives in Miami, and they had the reverend spoke about, redemption, and spoke about how he was really working with people that had been formerly incarcerated. Then they had somebody the judge allowed. This is now we're looking at 4 o'clock here on the clock. The judge judge allowed them to bring in a re-entry expert, a formerly incarcerated individual, Giovanni Saris from Miami, from this first step program that he runs. And he said that, yes, Mr. Combs would be a big asset to us to, talk to people that are going through this whole, going through imprisonment. Because also what came out, I mean, there were so many things that came out today. The number one, they were doing that because they said at MDC, which we all know how terrible the conditions are there,
yes, we do.
At MDC.
Yes, we do.
They said that he had stopped the gang violence because there'd been a tremendous amount of gang violence, as you all know, at MDC between the different factions, because that's, the different gangs and the different sets run certain sections of the jail, of the detention center. So Diddy had started a 6-week business course to try and said, listen, okay, the only rule is no fighting, no stabbing. This was after.
But that goes a long way in a judge's calculation of somebody.
Well, this is all sort of critical. I want to get back to this, but let's toss it back to the studio for a moment.
And let me dial in. Yeah, let me get connected in.
Let's toss it back over to you guys.
We have
all right,
so
Lisa,
much more.
Arthur Duarte, we appreciate it, and we will check back in with you shortly. Thanks so much for your perspective on this big announcement today. Of course, Diddy being sentenced to 50 months behind bars. And stay with Fox 5 for continuing coverage of Diddy's sentencing. We're also going to be posting updates on our free Fox local app. We'll have more of the 5 o'clock news after this break.
Fox Local.
All right, we continue to follow more breaking news. Hamas has accepted some parts of President Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza, including the release of all remaining hostages.
Fox 5's Stephanie Bertini is live at the Israeli consulate on the east side with all the details. Steph?
Hey, good evening. So these details just coming down. What we do know is that Hamas is accepting some elements of a deal put forth by President Trump, and the elements include releasing all of those remaining hostages, as is now being widely reported. But Hamas says other elements require further consultation among Palestinians. As the war reaches its 2-year mark, President Trump said Hamas must accept the deal by Sunday, or else greater force would be the result. The U.S. heavily allied with Israel since Hamas militants attacked and took hostages, which led to the start of the war. President Trump's peace plan has been accepted by Israel and welcomed internationally, but key mediators in Qatar and Egypt have said some elements need further negotiations. There are not exact details out right now about any specifics on what those further negotiations or those elements are. Under the plan, which the president unveiled earlier this week alongside Israeli Prime Minister Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Hamas would immediately release the remaining 48 hostages, around 20 of them believed to be alive. Hamas would also give up power and disarm, although there's no indication at this time that Hamas is willing to do that. In return, Israel would halt its offensive and withdraw from much of the territory, release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and allow an influx of humanitarian aid and eventual reconstruction in the area. The effects of the war have been felt internationally, including here in New York City. The release of the hostages is something that many have been pushing for since day one of this conflict. Back to you inside.
Well, thanks, Stephanie. And breaking news out of Washington. A government funding vote fails in the Senate yet again. A Republican bill that would reopen the government fell short of the 60 votes needed to end a filibuster and pass the legislation. With senators set to leave for the weekend, hope is fading for a quick end to the shutdown, which is now in its third day. Republicans looking to reopen the government under current spending levels. Democrats holding out for more health care spending.
Programs are life and death for many veterans. The fact of the matter is veterans have held up their side of the bargain.
There are real people being hurt right now. We have women, infants, and children nutrition programs that are now not funded. You have veterans health services that are not funded. FEMA, many of their services are stalled right now in the middle of a hurricane season.
President Trump also threatening to lay off federal workers rather than furlough them.
Well, the Trump administration is restoring $187 million in counterterrorism funding for New York that it had previously planned to cut. The New York Times was the first to report that change, saying according to White House officials, the Department of Homeland Security made the cuts without explanation and without approval of the president. Governor Hochul released a statement saying she's glad President Trump heard our call and reversed course. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch also reacting to the news today.
This reversal ensures that the women and men of the NYPD will continue to have the resources that they need to keep the city safe from terrorism.
The federal funding will help support various law enforcement efforts, including intelligence operations and emergency preparedness.
All right, we'll be right back in a moment. Nick will be up with a check of the forecast.